Finally, please visit psychcentral.com/show and listen to our podcast, The Psych Central Show. Our weekly podcast covers all things mental health and psychology. It's the best 20 minutes you'll spend this week, and you just might learn something. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sustaining Positive Brain Change. Let's begin.
Okay, thank you, Gabe. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Elisha Goldstein. I'm a psychologist. I'm the co-founder for the Center for Mindful Living here in Los Angeles. And I'm the founder and guiding teacher of a 6-month online mentorship program called A Course in Mindful Living. And you know, what we're going to talk about today is something really near and dear to my heart, and something that I feel like is one of the more important things for our time when we're trying to create sort of lasting change in our lives. And you might be curious about what you're seeing right now in this. So this is just something that I put in the presentation. This is a popcorn kernel, in case you didn't get that. It took me a long time to figure that out for myself. And basically, it's just based on this understanding and the science behind understanding that our minds wander about, 47% of the time, based on an old Harvard study that came out over a decade ago now. So from time to time, once in a while, this will pop up in the presentation. And the idea is just to take note of that your mind has wandered, and just notice that it's thinking about something, maybe jot it down, and very gently come back to our presentation here today. I would also say this. This is a really special time that you're giving yourself, and learning and integration happens best if we're attending to something. So if you have multiple tabs open at once, or if you're texting while you're listening to this, or doing many things, unless you're driving and listening at the same time, see if you can put those aside for a minute and let this hour just be an hour for you, for learning, for connecting, and we'll go from there. Anytime your mind wanders off that, again, something from the Now Effect that I wrote a long time ago: see, touch, go. See where your mind went, touch it for a moment, jot it down, gently go back to where we are. Okay, so here we go. Let's begin. Wonder why. There we go. Okay, so here we are, sustaining positive brain change, building community, fostering mentorship, and creating enriched environments to deepen mindfulness practices in particular. Today, here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to talk about how positive brain change can be simple, what gets in the way. We have to know what gets in the way in order to overcome that. The science of play for learning and integration, how important play might be. Towards the end of our time together, we'll talk about what the X factor actually is for enduring change. So stick around till the end to get that piece. It's really important. And I'll give you a sneak peek into a way that I've created to make this all a little bit easier. Ultimately, you want to listen to this, but just take what's useful and leave the rest. Don't get hung up on stuff that you're not finding that useful. Don't worry about it. We're going to be moving through this pretty quickly, as there's a lot to cover and a lot to give you. And so if something's not useful, just leave the rest, or I would say pop it into that chat or question window, and we can get to it in a little bit. Okay, so here we go. Strengths are grown from experiences. They're not just some didactic educational thing that we read or listen to like we're doing right now. We can activate states of mind, and when we practice and repeat them over time, they turn into traits, just like anything else. We practice something over time, it gets easier and becomes more natural. So if we want to become more compassionate, practice compassion, more grateful, practice gratitude, more mindful, practice mindfulness. Not completely rocket science there, but we kind of forget that the most powerful thing that we have is something called procedural memory, which is when we're actually practicing something over time, our brain is memorizing a certain procedure, and then it starts to come to us automatically. There's a variety of ways to explain why this is, both neurologically and psychologically, but you know this most importantly from your own experience. So without experience, if something is really no learning, the brain doesn't change without experience. And so what we know about brain change is, and sustained neuroplasticity, is that it happens through prolonged and repeated experience over time. So we're good at creating states of mind, but we're not really that good at integrating them into more traits of our character. And this is a weakness that we see in education and psychotherapy and human resource training, coaching, and also, yes, in mindfulness training. It's something that is difficult and we're lacking. And we're going to talk about what's going to make integration easier. So let's talk about the blocks here. What gets in the way? 3 major problems that influence our brain's implicit decision making. Implicit decision making is your brain's automatic fast judgments about whether something's urgent or not urgent, important or not important, good or bad, right or wrong. It just does this kind of stuff automatically. And so here's 3 major issues. The first one, we have an overly nervous system. We are trained and wired to be aware of the stuff that's going to maybe cause us problems in our life, or fearful, things that we're fearful of. And I'll kind of go into this, but here's a quick game we can play. If you're able to, if you're just in listening mode, you're not going to be able to see this, but if you're watching right now, you're going to be able to watch this, and we'll go through this and you'll just have a brief experience. So I'll have you kind of just close your eyes. I'll tell you to open your eyes, and then we'll have you close your eyes and open your eyes again. So just close your eyes for a second. Open your eyes. Notice what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Close your eyes. Open your eyes. Noticing what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Close your eyes. Open your eyes. Noticing what you're thinking, what you're feeling. Okay, so here we have is an example of our brain's negativity bias. For most people, and I've done this with hundreds and hundreds of people, the second picture of the person who has a black eye, the first picture, if you were just listening, was someone smiling. Second picture was someone who had like a black eye and looked like they'd been beaten up. Third picture, just a neutral picture of a plate. Most people have more activation in their bodies. They feel it physically when they see that second picture more than the first picture. They're having more of a feeling response. And that's your brain lighting up more when it's in relation to something negative versus something positive or neutral. So that's a bit of the experiential exercise behind what's been called the negativity bias. Negativity bias, if you're not familiar with it, you might be familiar with it, is something that from an evolutionary perspective, our ancestors back in the day were the ones that were paying attention to all the negative and fearful cues out there, are the ones that survived. So they passed their genes on to us. So we're thousands and thousands of years of crafted, our brains are crafted around paying attention to the negative more than the positive and exaggerating it even. And we feel it in our bodies. John Cacioppo, the University of Chicago, did a study like this, the one like I just showed you, somewhat similar, to show that there's a lot more activity going on in the brain when we're exposed to negative stimuli versus positive. That's a little bit around the neuroscience of the negativity bias. And John Gottman up in Seattle, he took videos of couples engaging with each other, and he slowed the video down, and he could study their micro expressions. And what he found was that with relationships, you need to have about 5 positive experiences to 1 negative experience in order to have a balanced relationship. And take that with a grain of salt. But basically, what that meant was the negative one counted so much more to us than the positive one did. So again, the negativity bias and effect in relationships. Barbara Fredrickson, the University of North Carolina, borrowed a ratio from the corporate world and did her own research on it and said we need to have about 3 positive experiences to 1 negative experience to feel well. And again, a simplified explanation of this, but at the same time, these are 3 different areas. One is neurological, the other one is in relationship, the other one is psychological and individual. They all come up with the same bottom line, which is there's more going on when there's a negative experience than a positive. So you can imagine how this plays out when you're trying to do something in your life that makes, whether it's playing guitar or exercising or doing a meditation practice, the moment we rub up against something that might be a stressor or point to the fact that we can't do this, our brain's going to exaggerate that and pay more attention to it. So it's going to make it harder to actually do. Second one, sort of enough said with this one. It's a picture of a phone with 1 million apps on it, and we are what we practice. And so we live in a day and age now, almost doesn't matter how old you are, where we practice and repeat switching tasks so quickly and paying attention to so many things at once and multitasking so heavily between applications that our brain just has this continuous fractured attention. it's really hard to pay attention. So in the first one, with the negativity bias, we have this overly nervous system. It's really hard to relax. And we know that when we're more relaxed and calm, we learn better. With this, it's really hard to attend because we've been trained to have a difficult time attending for a prolonged period of time. So, there's these two instances that are obstacles to actually sustaining a meditation or a mindfulness practice. Or you can think of really most practices or anything else in your life. The third one, and maybe the most important one out of all of these, is we have a lack of positive social cues and support around us. So in other words, just consider this. If you're trying to do whatever practice you're trying to do in your life, and we'll just say this is mainly around mindfulness right now, bringing mindful living into your life as an example, just consider how many people you spend, of the people you spend most of your time with, how many of those people, when you think of them, inspire you to live that way? And you may be the outlier of someone who does have a lot of people that inspire them around them to live, let's say, mindfully. But for most people, that's just not the case. They may have supportive people around them, but they don't really inspire them. Positive social cues are cues, things in your environment, and which are people and things that when you see them out of the corner of your eye or you think of this thing, it reminds you or inspires you to live or do a certain thing. So we have a real lack of positive social cues in our environment, and that makes it harder to implicitly actually lean towards a practice such as mindful living. So here's a quote that was attributed, or that Albert Einstein inevitably got published in the New York Times in the 70s, but he wrote it in the 50s, where he said, "A human being is part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, or you might say herself, his or her thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures in the whole of nature and its beauty." So basically, one of the things that you can take away from this, you might have taken something away from this already, but one of the things you might consider is we have a complete interdependence on our environment. And when I mean environment, I don't mean the environment like this planet. I mean like everything that's outside of your physical self. That means people and things. When you walk into a room, immediately that's influencing your brain's decision making, depending on what's in the room and who's in the room. And whether that's your work environment or your home environment or whatever it is, the way you think, the choices you make have a dependence. Your environment influences your brain's automatic decision making. We have an optical delusion of separateness from not just people but things. And the more we can recognize as an interdependence, the more we can begin to craft our environments in a way that actually influence our brain's implicit decision making to live in the way we want to live. So, okay, so just hold that for a minute, and we'll kind of move on from there. So what do we need to influence our brain's implicit decision making towards mindful living, as an example? We need enriched environments. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the science around enriched environments, what we know about them, and inevitably we'll kind of get to what you need to do to be able to kind of craft that for yourself. So brain enriched environments, this is kind of like a term that I kind of came up with, but the stimulation of the brain by its physical and social surroundings. Brains in richer, more stimulating environments have higher rates of neurogenesis and connections leading to increased brain activity. Also, I'll share with you some of the science around this. So once again, the stimulation of the brain by its physical and social surroundings. That's a brain-enriched environment. Brains in richer, more stimulating environments, now pick the kind of change you want to make in your life and kind of plug that in there, have higher rates of neurogenesis and connections leading to increased brain activity. Okay. So we're going to shift into something that's going to talk about, that's going to lead and that's going to integrate with enriched environments. So what's play? It's natural. Those of you who are viewing this are going to see a couple images. just notice what you notice. So when you see this image right here, two cats kind of jumping towards each other. This is an example of play. As soon as I see this image, I'm seeing a flexibility, openness, social engagement. There's a lightness to this. In fact, there's no judgment going on, in this moment. It's just a spontaneity, in the moment. Okay, so we'll see what's going on in this next one. So here's two pandas looking at each other. Again, social engagement, looking into each other's eyes, which is activates our social engagement, the part of our neurobiology, which is like this vagus nerve, the nerve that connects our brain to our hearts, which has been associated with whether it's a higher tone or lower tone, with anxiety and depression with lower tones, and feeling well and healthy with higher tones. So we know that we want to kind of influence our vagal tone. One thing we do with kind of playing, we know with playing, kind of looking in each other's eyes, that social engagement influences that vagal tone. So again, connection, looking into each other's eyes. There's a sense of warmth that's here. You see kind of one of the pandas smiling. Again, here, a mother and a child looking in. Let's assume it's a mother and child. Could be anybody, actually, as it turns out. But there's a lightness. There's a smiling that's there. There's no judgment that's really happening, in that moment. And so we're kind of understanding the qualities of play. So defining play. This is the way I define it in my book, Uncovering Happiness. It's a flexible state of mind in which you're presently engaged in some freely chosen and potentially purposeless or purposeful activity that you find interesting, enjoyable, and satisfying. So here's where we get into enriched environments. Marion Diamond, one of the leading neuroplasticity researchers at UC Berkeley, did an original experiment years ago where she took mice and she basically took them and put them in three different conditions: Playmates and toys, Playmates and no toys, no Playmates and no toys. So she had them run through a maze, put them in these conditions. A few weeks later, had them run through the maze again, and then studied their brains. And so basically what they found was the group one, who had the Playmates and the toys. These are my terms, Playmates and toys. So they not only afterwards ran the maze faster, which meant that they actually learned and remembered where the cheese was. They could remember it. But they also had a thicker cerebral cortex, which the cerebral cortex, the outer layer of your brain, is involved with cognitive processing, attention, and awareness. They would switch out the toys too every few days, and to understand that there's a key determinant, which is novelty. And in play, there's a lot of novelty, newness, curiosity, this type of stuff. What they found was the group that had no Playmates and no toys showed a thinning of their cerebral cortex. So neurogenesis can go both ways, of course. And so what we learned was, in this, we can take away is having people around us, and also having things that are things that engage novelty are really good for the brain, which also is good for cognitive processing and attention. Remember, if you can, just tying back for a second to the earlier slide about one of the obstacles being our inability to attend. Okay. Group 3, here's a picture of group 1 mouse if you want to see them. So there we go, happy mouse. So again, Jaak Panksepp, another researcher, found that he took mice and had them kind of rough and tumble play with each other years ago, and then he studied a protein in the brain called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, otherwise known as brain fertilizer. And what they showed was the mice who played, rough and tumble played for 30 minutes, showed increased gene expression of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So what does that do? This brain fertilizer actually facilitates neurogenesis. So facilitates the growth of neural connections in our brain. People and or animals that have low BDNF show dendritic attrition. And so play is actually healthy for our brains. If we can extrapolate from mice studies, as it turns out, mice brains aren't terribly different than human brains. And so we can extrapolate from that and say, well, you know, brain play is actually really healthy for our brains. So we got to, Ellen Langer, the first woman to become a tenured professor at Harvard, did a study years ago where she took elderly men and she brought them out to 2 different cabins. One that was situated like it was in the 50s, had Perry Como playing on the radio, and all the pictures up were like they were in the 50s. So they're literally kind of going back in time, and these guys were just kind of acting as if it was sort of that time, playing with each other. And they came in with canes, and their eyes were, you know, going, and the other group just had nurse, and there was no nursing in there, no one helping them in these cabins. But the other group had the same. They were in the cabin, but they had the same type of supports that they had in their nursing home. And so they found was after a couple of weeks, the group that was in the more playful cabin, we might say, many of them dropped their canes. They were able to do all the things that without the help and support that they were having before. Some of their eyesight improved when they put them in front of a group, both groups, when they put them in front of a group that hadn't seen them before. The group that was playing more was judged as younger than the other group. So just considering this, the benefits of play, the importance of play for learning and integration of material. So play not only is a way of kind of having an enriched environment, but also, aside from conscious aging, everyone wants the secret to the fountain of youth. So aside from that, we know from Ellen Langer's study that it enhances learning and integration. So it's the central attitude we want to come from. And we also know here through Ellen Langer's work that it can facilitate our own physical health. So the opposite of play is not work, it's depression, Brian Sutton Smith. So what's the secret here? What's one of the secrets behind an enriched environment, which is human connection? So let's look at this right now for a second. So we're if I was to say sort of what's the X factor for sustaining change, I was just to kind of get to the bottom of it for a second. One of the things we know historically as a people is that people, when we have those positive people and social cues around us, it makes it easier to do the things we want to do. So in other words, if you had a group of people around you who you knew all cared about you, understood you implicitly, and they were all living in the way that you wanted to live. Well, let's just use mindful living as an example. Just consider for a second if that would make things easier to do, if that would make the choices you want to make towards, let's say, sitting in meditation or acting mindfully in your life, or let's say you can even extrapolate it to exercise or certain ways of eating. If everyone was doing the things you wanted to do, would it be easier? Would thinking about them inspire you to do that? So we as a species, if we look back on it, are a social species. The animals that you're seeing in these pictures are all mammals, and we're mammals, and we started in clans. And we did this for a reason. We're no different than these other animals here. And the reason was it was about survival initially. So we needed to be part of clans in order to forage our food, and in order to be safe from other clans. But what happened? What happened? How come we've become this more independent, closed off socially type of pull ourselves by our bootstraps type of group where we don't need other people. So before I kind of move on to that, I want to tell you a little bit about why it's so important, why connection is so important. So one thing we know about some of the science around it is low social connection has been found, this is a study that came out years and years ago, to be worse than smoking, obesity, and high blood pressure. People who rate low in social connection. Now let me say something about social connection. That doesn't mean how many friends you have on Facebook. That means your degree of high quality connection. So in other words, someone could have 100 friends and another person could have 3 friends. If the person with 3 friends, those are really high quality connections, compared to the person with 100 friends with low quality connections, the person with the 3 friends would fare better. So when I talk about social connection, I'm talking about high quality social connection. So, so we can see how low social connection is really bad for our physical health. High social connection, on the other hand, has been correlated with higher mental well-being and resiliency. Barbara Fredrickson and Steve Cole out of Steve Cole to UCLA. So in other words, that was a study that was studying terms such as eudaimonia versus hedonia. Eudaimonia is when we have a sense of meaning and purpose in life, a sense of feeling connected in life in general. That was associated with higher mental well-being, also associated with lower blood pressure. So one thing we know of Jim Cohen's work at University of Virginia is that he had women who opted into a study where they were sent through an MRI, laid down an MRI machine, and had a little shock bracelet on, and he shocked them, and they, opted into this, of course, and so and he was studying what was going on in their brain, and he had them do this on their own, then he had them hold the hand of a stranger, then hold the hand of a loved one. And what he found was that the hypothalamus, which is involved with kind of our cortisol secretion that can measure our stress response, when they're holding the hand of a stranger, but even more so a loved one, that sense of physical connection, it calmed the hypothalamus. We know that connection increases vagal tone, again, that vagus nerve that connects our brain to our heart, which when again we have low vagal tone associated with anxiety and depression, high vagal tone associated with feeling well. Positive emotions, when we feel connected, we have an increase in vagal tone and we have an increase in positive emotions. And positive emotions allows us to feel more connected, which then inevitably again leads to higher vagal tone, and the spiral kind of goes up. Other studies have shown that when we're feeling joy or gratitude and we actually share that with another person and it's received with support, we get an extra boost of well-being. So for those of you who make your gratitude lists out there, that's one level, and it can be really helpful. Another level is to be able to share what's going on that's good in your life with others who are supportive to you in that way. So what happened here? So the reason we're having such a hard time with social connection is because we evolved in such a way where we don't need to forage anymore. We don't need to be safe from other clans getting us in our neighborhoods. We can go shopping and we can buy our own food. And so we can live in these little boxes. If you remember that song, little boxes on the hilltop, little boxes made of ticky-tack. So we live in these boxes now, so we don't really need other people. So we don't really have those positive social cues around us anymore. People who are inspiring us, we don't see them out of the corner of our eyes anymore, unless we leave our box and go to a gym maybe. And so what would it be like? What would be different if there was people around who you knew, around you, who you were connected with, who were inspiring you to do the things that you want to do? Would making the changes you want to make in your life be easier? That's the question. So here's what you need to do. Consider this for a second. You need to create positive social cues. So this is regular engagement with people. If we were to kind of sum this up, regular engagement with people who are engaging or wanting to engage, let's say we're talking about mindful living here, to engage mindfulness in their lives. So one thing you can do is take a relationship inventory. So in other words, think about all the people you spend most of your time with in your life, whether they're at work or at home, and ask yourself the question, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being really high, 1 being really low, Where do these people land as far as when I think of them, they inspire me to make the changes and do the things I want to do in my life. In other words, they inspire me to live mindfully in respect to what we're doing right now, to practice mindfulness in my life, online or offline, doesn't matter. Who are you in most relationship with during the day? So you can do that as an exercise, but I'll tell you, for most people, they find this exercise and find that they have very low social cues in their life that inspire them when they think about these people and they're in contact with them frequently to make the changes or do the things they want to do. So take a relationship inventory, seek out online or offline communities of people that you have regular engagement with, and go on a retreat. That helps for going deeper. But again, those are irregular, happens you might do once a year or twice a year or something like that, once every other year. Can help deepen your practice and create relationships with people, but you have to stay in relationship with them. So find a mentor, someone who you're engaging with regularly. Again, this is a way of enriching your environments. Remember, one of the key ways to enrich your environment is positive social cues. So those are people, and those are people who are going to be supportive to you and who you think of, and they inspire you. So that's mentorship. Back in the day, in every religious or spiritual or educational organization, we all have mentors. That's how higher learning and integration happens. So seek out mindful mentorship. Change your physical environment. So putting physical objects in your environment that cue you towards mindful living. In other words, quotes in your environment, objects, meditation cushion, books, music. Listen to music that inspires certain kinds of mindful qualities. I know we have a whole mindful living library of music that for different types of qualities that I have that I can kind of point to and listen to be able to inspire certain types of feelings for me. So here's 3 different ways to really begin to enrich your environment. So I want to tell you about a research study that I've done over the past year, basically, that is all about this type of thing, helping people enrich their environment. So I'll tell you what this was. This was a 6-month study, basically. It was a program, community-focused, enriched environment. There was a large online engaged community, about 350 people, small mentorship groups that they engaged with every single month where they got to see each other through a technology called Zoom, with trained teachers who are supporting them all along the way, weekly and in this kind of more in-person session. One-on-one online mentorship and regionally based peer encouragement pods. So without the mentor, but the pods would get together themselves to support one another and talk through like what their challenges and obstacles were, and create relationships. And inevitably, global offline retreats, which in this particular study, which is ongoing, hasn't happened yet. So it's basically a 6-month curriculum that intention was to build positive social cues and strengths of relaxation, stability, mindfulness, self-compassion, positive emotion, compassion, and balance, all within what we're talking about here, which is something that can facilitate an enriched environment around creating positive social cues and mentorship. So I'm going to give you a little behind the scenes of this for a second. So again, here we are with this thing. Take a note if your mind has wandered. You can see, touch, write down if something's important. Gently go back to being with us here right now, just so you can see, a little bit about what this thing is that is in some ways a game changer towards creating enriched environments for people. So here it is, Course of Mindful Living, behind the scenes. Every couple weeks, people go through a particular meditation practice that all builds on themselves. So the first one is learning how to relax the nervous system. So what did we say earlier is one of the obstacles that gets in the way of learning and integration is this overly nervous system. So in the beginning of this program, it was key to teach people how to actually relax their nervous systems through particular meditation practices that help them train their brain to do that. So people have an option to fit, you can't fit everyone in a box. So, some people are going to want to do a 10-minute practice, a 20-minute practice, or a 30-minute practice. Those are all options within this program. Then we talk about how do you learn how to relax the nervous system in your everyday life, and we talk about deepening. So we have ways of kind of bringing the learning into our everyday lives. Meanwhile, everyone's engaging with each other all throughout the program, both within the program and also in their mentorship groups, which you'll see in a minute. An example of a kind of what happens with the DEEPEN. Then play. You and I have talked about play and how play facilitates learning and integration. In every lesson, which unfolds every 2 weeks, we go through a play activity. The first one being, how do you revamp or create a meditation space? So we see all these different meditation spaces that people actually post, which blew me away, because I've never seen another space where we got to see people from all around the world and all the different ways that they sit in their practice around mindful living. So you can see all the different ways people actually sit in their practice, whether that's with a cushion, or whether that's on a special chair, listening to their audio meditation on their computer, or whether that's on the couch with their dog, or whether it's outside, out in nature, all these different ways that people can learn how to play. And to make your space, if you're talking about mindful living or meditation, playful, creative, or special to you is really important when we're talking about an enriched environment, because it can cue you to invite you to go do that thing, because your brain sees it and says, that's really inviting, I like that, and then kind of moves in that direction. And so people had a lot of fun and a lot of creativity creating or revamping their meditation spaces. Other in month 4 of this program, we're talking about learning how to savor and learning how to be aware of the good and learning how to enhance joy in our lives, individually and relationally. And one of the things we do that through is nature. Nature is also part of our environment. So one of the ways we play is walking through nature, and people took pictures of all their natural environments all around the world. And so we get to connect with each other as with a common humanity and saying, yeah, nature is a part of our life. It's part of our enriched environment. To get out to it more and see what other people have kind of inspires us to connect with what is so healthy for us. Every couple weeks, there's something to learn. Like the first one is around the science of happiness. The second one is around the science of play. It's me teaching really about what we're learning, what we know as far as science and practice around different topics that are going to inevitably unlock our ability to create more of a sustained type of well-being. So again, science of play, it kind of looks something like this. Give people 183 pleasurable activities to choose from, just to kind of inspire their mind. Mentor sessions kind of look like this. So you can see where it's not just some kind of static online course that people are going through. These are real people, and we get to see they're real people in this course, and that matters. That makes a huge difference, because when we're talking about enriched environments and positive social cues, in order to create a relationship with someone, it makes it a lot better if we can see them, because we get the sense that, here's a real person here. And so we engage with each other regularly through these kind of smaller group sessions all along the 6 months that we go. People can opt into individualized coaching if they want to go deeper and get more one-on-one support. There's interviews from some of the leading people out there teaching us. Like here's one on Kristen Neff. The 3rd month, we talk about self-compassion. Go deep into self-compassion. First, we learn how to relax our nervous system. We learn how to focus. We learn about mindfulness. And then we got to understand that this isn't so easy necessarily. And we go a deep dive into self-compassion. One of the bonus interviews is around Kristen Neff. That's me interviewing these people for about half an hour around real practical aspects of how do we integrate this stuff into our lives. Every month has a book of the month that people can opt into. First one being The War of Art. You might be familiar with this one. Fantastic book around resistance, because that's what comes up when it comes to mindful living. One of the obstacles is around resistance that comes up for us, around really any change that you want to make. And so that's one that arises. To facilitate play and fun, we have a couple different 30-day meditation challenges with prizes at the end, whether it's a Zafu or whether it's access to a paid app that you get for free, or whether it's a bracelet that reminds you to be present. All of these things kind of come up in these really fun meditation challenges where people are engaging with each other all throughout and supporting each other. If you can imagine like one of the warmest environments of people who all want to really support each other in living this way, living with an enhanced sense of mindfulness in their lives, this is the space where this sort of happens. So you see the list of a variety of different types of meditations that come up. You know, people are supporting each other with comments all throughout. And so if you can imagine hundreds of people going through a program and supporting each other, and creating relationships with each other and getting ongoing mentorship support, where they're really learning and integrating this work into their lives. We know the reality around social and emotional contagion in this world. There's a real science behind it. So if you can imagine more people integrating this deeply into their lives through relationship and support, imagine the ripple effects that we can create globally, locally and globally. And that's the biggest intention of this, is to kind of create ripple effects across the globe, individually in people's relationships, families, cultures, and across the globe. So that was the program. That was the 6-month one. There was at the end of the day, there was a 95% satisfaction rating with the program, between all those people. And so to me, it did what it sought out to do. And so, oops, that goes to the resources. So I just wanted to announce to you, and you might know this already, this program is going underway again starting October 2nd. And you can go to acourseofmindfulliving.com and check it out. And you can also kind of bring this into your life as well, and begin integrating this to create a greater sense of integration around mindful living, to really enhance and enrich your environment, and allow the ripple effects to take place. So I know we're going to create we have a little time just briefly for any Q&A. I don't see any questions unless I'm not looking in the right area, which is definitely possible.
All right, I see a couple questions that popped up here. Do you want to give a shot at answering a couple of them?
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
I was muted. Sorry, everyone. I was somehow muted. I didn't know how to get back to being unmuted. So, yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Yes. All right. I will pop them up. The first one is: do you have any observations specific to chronic tinnitus?
You know, tinnitus is a tough one, and the people that I know who have been working around mindfulness with it, there's various. So here's my sense. If something is on a scale of 1 to 10, if it's at a 7, 8, 9, 10, then when that is happening, sometimes sometimes mindfulness itself is not the answer to that, and sometimes there's a great art to distraction, and it's a similar thing to chronic pain. But if you are able to, and just to kind of soften your body when you notice your body reacting to the sounds that are happening there, and you can soften your body and just create an awareness of it, and allow that to simply kind of, in some ways, kind of go as a practice in the background of your awareness, while in the foreground you're paying attention to whatever you're paying attention to, not resisting it anymore. That could be that people have found to be very supportive. But if it's really engaging you, and your frustration level and intensity of it is a 7, 8, 9, 10, and sometimes the great art of distraction can come into play. But there are specific tinnitus places that can be supportive. I know there's one here right outside of Los Angeles.
Excellent. And the next question that we have is, how long does it take to achieve meaningful changes, assuming regular MBSR practice, say 6 of 7 days? Thank you.
Okay, that's a really good question. And, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which I'm a big supporter of, having co-authored the workbook of it, is a powerful program, and it's 8 weeks. And so this, by the way, this 6-month program came out of my experience teaching a lot of these programs for many, many years. And what I came to realize was that you can have profound experiences within 8 weeks. And the science shows that, that people have real changes around stress reduction, increased aspects of well-being, even neurological change after the 8 weeks. But the question comes as far as, can you sustain that practice once the community's gone after the 8 weeks? And where's the support? Where's the support after that? And so what the research shows is that people have a harder time sustaining their practice after that time. They still can gain the benefits of the 8 weeks for a long time to come, but it begins to kind of dwindle away because to me, the reason is because there's no community there at the end of the day, and so it can have a profound impact for a period of time. And then I think we need to really consider working on enriching our environments, both socially and environmentally, and that can really facilitate sustaining some of those changes. And so 8 weeks is great. It's a good experience, a good foundation. I really think you need many, many months. Consider, for example, anything else. Learning to play guitar, or learning or exercising or something like that. You can feel a difference in 8 weeks, but if you really want to make enduring change, you have to be doing that for many, many months. A lot of people don't like hearing that, but it has to be sort of become a lifestyle, and that's what really facilitates that. And what facilitates making it a lifestyle is enriching your environment, because it makes it easier. That your brain gets to play off the environmental and social cues that are there to help make the decision to sit or respond mindfully or practice self-compassion, or these types of things that are great states that we want to begin integrating into traits. So that's why I chose 6 months, because I believe it takes really about that amount of time for deeper integration. And so I'm a big supporter of MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction. I do believe that there's a next, that anybody, even John Kabat-Zinn, who created that program, would agree that longer periods of time with community support and mentorship would create and facilitate stronger learning and integration. I hope that was supportive and that made sense. If there's a follow-up question, I'm happy to answer that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The next question is, what was the secret point you were going to give regarding sustaining change? Is it play, building community, etc.?
The X factor for it was around community and ongoing mentorship. That's really it. That's the key, and that's the hardest part, because we live in a culture now where, again, we're more separate, and if you think of the people around you, they don't necessarily inspire you to. I mean, maybe for some of you they do, but for most of us, they don't necessarily inspire you to lean into practicing mindfulness formally and informally in your life, and to be able to make more connections with people and have experiences with them over time facilitates creating a relationship. And when we have relationships in our lives of people that are positive social cues for this, it allows us to play on our brain's implicit decision making, which helps us make decisions without having to draw on our willpower to practice. And so yes, so community and ongoing mentorship is really the X factor for sustained positive brain change. Play is a key attitude that we want to learn to get better and better at, because that's been shown to facilitate learning and integration. The two pieces earlier on in this presentation that we need to also work on for learning and integration is learning how to relax our nervous system and learning how to focus again around concentration. So if we can learn how to create a foundation around learning how to be relaxed and focused, have a playful attitude towards this, and create an enriched environment around us, we've set ourselves up over time for facilitating more sustained well-being in our lives. You might say more sustainable happiness.
Thank you so much. The next question is, what would you say to someone very shy who is scared of participating in a course like this?
To me, I think this is the course for someone who's shy, because it allows you to engage in it in a way that fits your lifestyle without having to expose yourself physically necessarily. Like, so for example, with the mentorship groups, and I would work on building confidence around that, and work on, one of the things we work on in month 3 is around courage. Supporting courage. And so, but you can join the mentorship groups without your webcam, just with your audio. And so you can kind of do it in a way that allows you to ride the edge of where you feel comfortable, and continue to kind of grow from there. So you get the online part, which allows you to engage that with a lot of people who are shy, find online interaction easier. And then when it comes to the in-person viewing part of the mentorship group, you can start by not having your camera on, and then maybe get to a point where you turn it on or not. It's up to you. But you end up engaging it in a way that fits your lifestyle.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The next question is, I have difficulty since quite some time to understand. Let me change this a little bit. I have some difficulties understanding what exactly you mean by brain integration. Of course, I know what integration means, but still, perhaps you can explain this a little bit.
I think the words I was using was learning and integration. And so when I mean integration, I mean that now it comes to you naturally. In other words, you've really integrated this in a way that's not just cognitive. You didn't just learn it in a book. You've experienced it. You know it through your experience. And it starts to come naturally to you. And that's what I mean by integration. You don't have to think too much about it. Like, so for example, you learned how to type. You practiced and repeated it over time. You don't have to think about typing anymore. You just do it. You've really integrated that experience. It's there for you. You don't have to. It's part of your procedural memory, and it's automatic. And that's what I mean when it comes to mindful living. We have the ability through practice, and much easier practice in community, with community and real support, to facilitate integration, which means to facilitate making this more automatic, making this move from a state of mind to a trait of your character.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And this, we had one question that just popped in that I think is particularly good. Could you expand on building and creating curiosity? Yeah,
sure. That's a great question, and one that's really close to my heart. So curiosity to me, so my definition of mindfulness is intentionally paying attention to something in the moment with an engaged curiosity. So curiosity is where you're intentionally becoming interested in something. Intentionally or not, actually. You might just be naturally interested in it. You're being curious about it. In other words, you can pick up an apple and you can say, it could just be an apple and you can just bite into it, or you can, for a moment, take a moment to look at the apple and see the shape of the apple and be curious about how the light for a moment like plays off the apple, and then bite into the apple and actually pay attention to, curious about the taste of the apple. One of the correlative terms is called beginner's mind, noticing something as if for the very first time. Similarly, in a relationship, you can take offense to somebody's way of engaging with you, or you can for a moment be curious about maybe where this person's coming from, the shoes they're walking in, what might have happened to them prior to even talking to you that might have put them off. Like, you know, that sense of being curious helps people feel more relaxed, because they feel like you really want to listen to them and understand them. You actually care about them, and so they drop their armor, they drop their defense a little bit, and feel more connected to you. When you're curious about something, you're engaging with it, so you're connecting more versus disconnecting.
Thank you so much. Another question that just popped in is, do you think that mindfulness can help with outbursts that are sometimes really hard to control and out of control?
Well, well, let me just say, for sure. And it's interesting because I just did an interview not long ago with a group that overseas is connected to like 150,000 people in the policemen and women, and there's a lot of emotions that come up in that job. And so one of the things that we talk about is sometimes reflective mindfulness, which is looking back onto a past experience and first kind of understanding what happened and how we might have done that differently, and even visualizing a future experience and imagining yourself not engaging it, surfing the urge, in other words, of the reaction that might be there, the anger, the frustration, slowing it down. And so then you're creating kind of memories in your mind, even through visualization, around the experience that can be recalled in the actual moment that something's happening. And then as we're practicing it, we're practicing mindfulness, we're practicing being more aware in moments of our lives, and as we practice and repeat that, that starts to become more natural to us, and then can begin integrating into those difficult moments as well. And so absolutely, I would say, your brain works off memories, and the more memories you create around integrating mindfulness with those difficult moments, the more likely they are to be recalled, and recalled in the moment. And the key around this is a lot of self-compassion, a lot of forgiveness, because that lets us kind of continue practicing with it and learning to get better and better at it. And that's the key. We can always learn how to get better and better at this. But I would say for sure, no question in my mind, the practice of this, and it's not a panacea, but it's just about being aware. The more we become aware, the more we're in the space of choice to choose to do something different, that's all. And we can definitely do that even if we're practiced at flipping our lid. We can learn to get better and better at that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So this is going to be our final question of the evening, and it's somewhat of a personal question. A viewer asked, how often do you meditate, and how long do you spend meditating?
Well, that's a really great question, because I'll say it's fluctuated in my life. And that's how I know how this all works, is because just like your mind can drift, your practice can drift. And things in your life can change. Being the father of three pretty boisterous boys, in their early years, I sometimes had to shift my practice. Sometimes my practice was sitting with them, rocking with them, and just being present to their connection to my body. That became my meditation. As I spent more time, and as they got a little older, and sometimes when I have space in my day, because I see people in my office sometimes, I can sit. And I sit with people quite a bit. So I would say I practice probably about 5 days a week, is the reality. But I would say through the course of my life, that's fluctuated. Again, sometimes shifting out my practice for something that, was more sustainable to my lifestyle in the moment with very, very young kids. And so there's no one way it has to be. Bringing a sense of intentional present moment awareness to a particular time is a mindfulness practice. And sitting meditation is a formal mindfulness practice. And so we have to find it in the way that fits our lifestyle.
Thank you so much. Well, that brings us to the end of our webinar. Do you have any final words? Is there anything that you want to leave our audience with before we go ahead and disconnect?
I would say whether you end up joining this program or not, these are important, really important things that aren't talked enough about, which is that optical delusion of separateness that we have, that Einstein said, with our environment and with people. We are far more connected than we know. When we're hateful towards another person or another group of people, that's just creating hate within ourselves. We are connected with those people, and as disconnected as we feel. And so we have to learn how to understand that that we're far more connected than we know. And we can learn to bring more kindness into this world, into our interactions with ourselves, to dial down the self-critic in our mind and bring more kindness to other people as well, all with understanding our own boundaries, of course. And through this, I'm a strong believer that we can create more, a greater sense of loving awareness, really, within ourselves and within our communities and the world. But it starts right here. It starts with us. And it starts with our willingness to bring this into our lives. And the reality is, again, the more we can understand that we can actually enrich our environments with people, finding the people that inspire us to do this work, the easier it is. And hopefully, and I'll continue now and into the years to come to try and create a space where people can connect with each other, to become more inspired by each other, and to be stronger, and make this world a better place.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please visit psychcentral.com, and in the next approximately 1 to 2 days, we will send out a recording. And I understand that you also have a gift for everybody that will also a link that will be included in that email. So we'll share that as well. Is that correct?
Yes, something to help enrich your environments right away. I hope you enjoy it.
Wonderful. So look for that email over the next day or two, and thank you, everybody.